Thank you, Tim. It's a huge honor for me to be here tonight, and it's great for me to be back in Amsterdam. It's the first time at the Bitcoin conference here, but it's the second time for me to be here. And I'm not only talking about the one initiative, I'm giving you a broad overview of what I'm doing. Basically, I'm wearing two hats tonight. I'm the university professor, so I'm doing my teaching and administration stuff, and I'm editing books. Here you can see two of them that recently came out, but I'm also connected to the industry, and which is quite important in the area of blockchain, because I don't want to live in an ivory tower. I'm also a board member of the City of Blockchain Vienna, and this is an association with the goal to connect to the industry, to reach out to blockchain startups and to help them to develop the business models. So those are the two hats I'm wearing tonight, and I'm jumping quite around a bit because I was not exactly sure what to expect tonight. And Richard told me there could be newbies in here, there could be some more seasoned programmers and so on. So I'm showing you research I'm doing, but I'm also showing you research others are doing, and hopefully there's something in it for you. Yeah, you all know that. I'm just showing it to you for two reasons. The first one is, that's just a Google search. I was searching for blockchain and Bitcoin. The first thing is, when we are talking about blockchain, we are not talking about a technology that is 10 years old in the minds of most business people. We're talking about something that came up 3 or 4 years ago, and everybody went crazy about it. So here we have the starting point, 2008, and the first Bitcoin client came up 10 years ago. But in the minds of most people, it's a technology that's 3 or 4 years old, even so the roots go back much more. And the second thing I want to point out, it's not the first hype I'm experiencing. When I started doing my PhD, that was the dot-com bubble. And the same thing here. There are two phases. If it goes up like that, everybody goes crazy and is throwing money at you if you have a startup. If it goes down like that, it's all bad. But the truth is, it's always something in between, And I'm a researcher, so I'm connected to startups. I'm sometimes helping them out. But I try to be objective. So I try not to fall from one extreme into the other. For me, it's all good or it's all bad. I want to figure out what we can do with the technology. Yeah, and just to give you one example, I was told that presentation should be interactive, so an easy exercise for you. Who is that? Jeff Bezos. Do you know when the picture was taken? That's more tricky than the first question, yeah? There's not an exam in the end. I'm a professor, but no exams today. So that was in 1999, but my point is a different one. My point is that in those times, Amazon was making a huge loss, and that those were the times, decades ago, when I was doing my PhD, and it was not clear if Amazon would make it. And it's the same situation here. There's so many business models using blockchain, and I'm not good in prediction. If I would be really good, I would have invented Facebook or something like that, honestly. But so it's really hard for me to say something. This will work out for sure. You will fail for sure. Now, for me, it's one step at a time. So now I'm getting started. The topic of my presentation today is all about sustainability. And when I got the invitation for tonight, I was suggesting that I'm going to tell a little bit about the future of blockchain, but then Richard told me that might be too fuzzy, and so we agreed on sustainability because I'm doing some research on that. And I thought, well, it's much easier, but because it's so much more focused. But then I figured out I was dead wrong. And the moment I was doing some research and was diving deeper, I figured out that the whole thing is blowing up. It's getting bigger and bigger and more complicated. It's hard for me to find the boundaries. And so my presentation today is more like a teaser for you, and hopefully you will get involved. What's sustainability in the first place? I'm giving you a definition here. That's from the World Commission on Environment and Development. That's the so-called Brundtland Report. And they're saying basically sustainability is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the needs of the future generations. What's important here, we have 3 pillars. It's not all about the environment. Environment, of course, is important. Most likely it's the first thing that comes to your mind. But it's also about society and economy. So what I'm doing now in my research, I'm trying to figure out how blockchain can help with any of those pillars. And again, a word of warning, I'm jumping around a little bit today because I know from experience, that audience can be very diverse. A couple of months ago, I was giving a presentation for students, and I was mentioning CryptoKitties all the time, and then one student told me that he has no idea what CryptoKitties are, and I figured out none of the students has heard about CryptoKitties before. So that was a wake-up call for me that I'm living in my own bubble. Who has not heard about CryptoKitties, by the way? So completely different audience. So that's what I expected. Thank you. So here we have the goals. Goals from the United Nations came up in 2015 with a nice list of 17 goals. And there are many, many sub-goals. And you can see it's pretty diverse. So many things you can include here. But again, my research now focuses on blockchain solutions that can help one or the other. And that's basically the focus. Coming up with business models, coming up with solutions that would not have been possible without the blockchain. And here I give you a couple of examples later on. I show you some business models that help, for example, fight hunger, to contribute to economic growth, to improve the infrastructure, and to reduce inequalities. This is the initiative Tim was mentioning before. Actually, I have to say, we just got started. I'm not sure if you heard about U4SSC before. It's an initiative from the United Nations, and the idea is to use information and communication technologies to make cities more smart. Meaning, what could that be? You can improve mobility, you can reduce congestion, you can improve environmental standards, things like that. And within that initiative, there is a special initiative that's called Blockchain for Cities. And in this working group, we are exploring the potential of blockchain to achieve those goals. And we just got started. I got invited half a year ago or so, and it took a while to set up the team. And we had the first meeting a couple of weeks ago. So I cannot present you any results, but I can tell you what we are doing. And again, this should be interactive, and if you want to be more than interactive, maybe it's also interesting for you to become engaged. And I can always give you some insights. If you send me an email, you will find my email address at the end of this presentation. I can keep you updated what we are doing. So we have 3 goals. We want to describe and document existing use cases. If you're working in a startup, any startup owners here in the room? Okay, a couple of them. If you're working in a startup and if you're doing something good for the city, just let me know. Maybe I can document your case. Second thing is we want to develop a conceptual framework, how blockchain can be used for smart cities. And finally, we want to come up with some recommendations for politicians. And the important thing here, this is not a commercial initiative, so I'm not getting paid for doing that. It's just improving quality of life, and hopefully there will be some outputs. Here we have the framework we're using. And here we have a couple of challenges which you can find in basically every city. We have environmental issues, we have issues with mobility, the society, governance, and finally safety and security. And here we have our checklist for blockchain. Are we going to use a blockchain or any kind of alternative? Which type of solution is appropriate? What kind of requirements do we have? How do we implement the solution? Finally, what are the benefits and what are the risks? And what's quite important here that the idea is to be very critical. Not to sell something to cities, but to figure out what they really need. And that's the first initiative. The second initiative I want to point out is one in which the City of Blockchain is involved. It's called Blockchain Cities Alliance. And this is basically an association that connects cities that are using smart solutions in that area. So this is something also you want to check out. And again, this is pretty new. So what I'm doing here, I'm pointing out stuff to you that hopefully might be interesting in the future. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me at any time. So what I did, I made a very incomplete list of a couple of industries and a couple of cases or use cases I found in the literature. And again, if you feel that something is missing here, then most likely you're right. What I'm doing today, I'm going to highlight a couple of those cases, and I'm showing you an example of startups mainly that are already targeting those issues. Some of them I'm involved in others I'm not involved in. First idea would be, and that's pretty straightforward, to use blockchain to raise some money. And that's a specific example. It's called Solarbolic. That's one of the companies that's working together with the city of blockchain where I'm involved in. They're producing solar sails, so solar energy. There's nothing blockchain in the business model, but the idea is to raise some money, and that's some very basic stuff. Creating tokens and letting the general public participate in fundraising. And I think that's something very exciting you can only do with the blockchain. That was not possible a couple of years ago. Then we had the hype. So before the hype, ICOs were coming up, and then everybody was very negative about it. But I still see a lot of potential as soon as we have some really good business models coming up. So that's pretty straightforward. Yeah, but I want to take it one step further. And in this research, I'm referencing a colleague of mine from ETH Zurich in Switzerland, who is doing research on that, and he has written a chapter in a book that I've recently edited. And just to get involved, a little bit of basic economics. What are positive externalities and negative externalities? Just want to get a feeling. If you know that. If it's too easy, just let me know. So what's a negative externality? Pollution, for example. So if you're using a common good and it has a negative output for everybody, and I have here pollution, congestion. And on the other hand, you can also have positive externalities. What could that be? If you're doing something and everybody benefits from it.
Transparency?
What kind of transparency?
For example, if you have a blockchain-based solution, maybe you can track all the transactions, you know, where the things or where the money is getting transferred at.
Oh yeah, you're thinking about blockchain in general. Very blockchain-based, yes, why not? But for example, if you clean the environment, if you have a really nice-looking house, things like that, and the point is, in our monetary system, it's really hard to reward those things. How can you give credits to somebody who is avoiding negative externalities and somebody who is creating positive ones? And this is something you can do potentially with a blockchain-based solution. On the next slide, I give you one practical example. So the idea would be, what kind of incentives does somebody have to create positive externalities and to avoid those? Second question, how can we make those tradable? So if you're doing something for the community, how can you benefit from that? And the third one, how can we measure success? And again, this is something where blockchain comes in. How could that be? Again, it's tokenization. It's on the next level. Creating tokens for people that are doing something good or that are avoiding any harm. In theory, how can we measure that? Yeah, we need some oracles. So we need some interfaces to the outside world. We need either humans telling us, oh, he or she has done something good or avoided something bad, or you can even think of sensor data. So that's the theory behind it. And again, a colleague of mine in Switzerland is doing a lot of research in that area, and I want to give you one practical example. But the idea is you can build your own examples on top of that. And that's the one. I'm not involved in that one. Have you heard about it? Cleaning up the River Niger. I see yes and no's. So in a nutshell, what's going on here? So the picture you can see here from the River Niger is not how it looks all the time, or in all places. They have a lot of issues with pollution, a lot of oil spills, and in many places it looks really sad. So local people are going out to clean the river, and of course they need some kind of incentive for doing that. So they get micropayments. So it's not some kind of external organization, a big one or an oil company, but it's the local people, and they're getting micropayments, and the whole thing is being monitored by contractors and the community. And now you can be creative and create some sensor-based data or things like that to measure the progress. So that would be one example, just one, for tokenization. Completely different topic, and that's one that Richard pointed my attention to. And I know that a couple of speakers have been here who talked about Ostrom. So I want to double check with you, who of you has heard about Elinor Ostrom and the 8 principles? Okay, most of you have not heard about them. That's good. So who was she? She died in 2012.
Nobel Prize winner.
She was a... So I got the information. She was the first woman and the only one so far who won the so-called Nobel Prize in Economics in 2009. And what did she do?
Yeah, I don't know the exact name because I heard it from Richard. Maybe you can tell
Can you jump in?
No, please.
Okay. In 1968, there was a paper published in Science magazine from Gareth Harding, and he said there's something called tragedy of the commons, meaning if we all can use a shared common good, chances are that everybody will take away as much as possible and then that nothing's left over. Just think of the seas or so, overfishing. That's the tragedy of the commons. And Elinor Ostrom said, oh, that's not true in all cases. So there might be some principles or rules that communities can follow in order to avoid the tragedy of the commons. So you have a shared possession and you're all using that without destroying it. And she came up with 8 principles. So I just need to keep 5 more minutes, okay. So she said, in order to have commons for a community, you need to have a boundary. You need to have rules that match the needs. You need to have some kind of possibility to modify the rules. You need to have some monitoring, and you need to have some sanctions if somebody doesn't follow the rules, and you need to have some mechanisms in case something unwanted happens that are graduated, and you need to have local enforcement, not from the state, but really on a community level, and finally, you need to have multiple layers, meaning you have the lowest level, the local level, then you have maybe a couple of communities working together and things like that. And I thought, wow, it's a very good framework. And she published a book in the 1990, and she has been done research on that before for long. So those principles are not based on blockchain or anything, but I thought it might be a good idea to see how blockchain could support us with following those principles. And as a researcher, I usually check the literature if somebody else has done something like that, and then figured out they did. So I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here. I'm not doing this research because somebody has already done it, but I want to build on it. So I'm pointing out the paper here. You have it on the slides. I got in contact with the first author, David Rosas, and he gave me more insight. They have a project going on with the European Union, P2P models, and there you can find more information. So what are the characteristics of the blockchain, the affordances? We have 6 of them. You can use the blockchain to make tokens. We talked about that. You can have some smart contracts that enforce something. You can have an autonomous automation. You can put smart contracts together. Then we have decentralization, transparency, and finally, the codification of trust. And now we have it. We have those principles from Ostrom, decades old, and then we have those new ideas that are based on blockchain. And what they did, now we have a matrix, they were checking how you can use those affordances from blockchain to work out those principles. I'll give you 2 examples. So you can use tokens to create a community. It doesn't have to be a local one. Everybody who holds a token is part of the community. You can use a smart contract. I assume you all know what smart contracts are, right? So you can use a smart contract to encode the rules and many others. So no worries, I'm not going over them in detail. Please look up the research, and David told me that they are still working on the implementation. So it's not out there yet. They have a couple of use cases, but they are working on that. And I find it very fascinating, taking the blockchain and trying to achieve something that a Nobel Prize winner figured out years ago. Another one, I'll give you a couple of examples. Another question, who is that one? A little bit more tricky than Jeff Bezos, right? 5 more minutes, Richard?
He's not here.
Oh, he's not here. Okay, so 10 more minutes. No, this is not Jeff Bezos, this is Silvio Gesell. He lived 1869, I think. He died in 1930. He was a German merchant and also a financial theorist. He came up with something that's really interesting that's called demurrage. I'm not sure if the pronunciation is correct, but it's money that loses value. You've heard about those experiments? So here it says this one is worth 100 marks from a German currency, but if you keep it for too long, it loses money. So every month it loses a little bit of money, and I'm not talking about Bitcoin here now. I'm talking about another coin that's called Freicoin. I guess you've heard about that one, huh? That's a coin, it's a cryptocurrency, and it loses money the longer you keep it. What's the idea? It doesn't make sense, huh? You have something and it loses money. What's the idea behind it? What's that? Spending it. That's the idea. And when I was a student, I had courses in economics, and I thought, well, those ideas are really good, sound interesting, but it's really hard to implement them. They have been implemented 1930s in Austria, but it was very local. And they stopped it in Austria. It was working fine, but do you know who stopped it? 1930s? Experiment? What?
Probably Hitler then.
It was not Hitler, it was the National Bank. They don't like experiments with money. So, but now we have it, and now we have it in code. And even here, those experiments worked. Don't ask me if it will work, I have no idea, but now we can do it. And I got in contact with one of the developers, Mark Friedenbach, because there's not much volume at the moment with Freicoin. But he told me he's working actively on it. He's working on new privacy solutions and atomic swaps. So this is something you can keep on your radar. I'm not sure if it will work out, but it's such an interesting experiment. It's fascinating because you have the mirage in the code.
But inflation is doing that already.
Yeah, but you see that with Bitcoin we had the issue of inflation, deflation. If a currency gains a lot of value, nobody's spending it, you're keeping it because tomorrow you're going to own more than you have today. And if you have inflation, yeah, if you really perceive it as inflation, then if you're smart, you're spending the money, right? But here, you have it here. It's so visible. But basically, you're right. But inflation is kind of hard to predict, and here you know exactly how much your money will be worth next month.
If I could say something about that, Horst. If there's an audience here with a substantial number of Bitcoiners, which I'm assuming that there are going to be at least a substantial number of people that won't accept that because they don't apply to that idea at all, right? Because that's one of the things that attracted many people to Bitcoin is the 21 million. So they still see it as a viable alternative.
Yeah.
So this is a fair debate. Let's say.
Absolutely, and
it's not settled yet.
You know, Bitcoin has a huge advantage. It's the sheer amount of hash power you need to attack it. It's a pretty safe system, and it's also the number one. I'm just pointing this out as an interesting idea. What you can do with cryptocurrencies, and many advancements are being made on Bitcoin. You know, all those. It's not the end of the line. You know what we're talking about now. A couple of examples. Yeah, this one is one startup we're working together with the City of Blockchain. What they are doing, they're offering a combined payment version that includes cryptocurrencies and also credit cards. Others are working on that too, but what's the point here? It's banking for the unbanked. They can offer payment services in regions where people don't have credit cards. It all has to do with sustainability, and that's what's fascinating for me about those new technologies. So another company I'm working together with, they're doing something that's going to improve food safety. They're tracking the whole food supply chain. Is it a big issue? Yes, it is. Here I got some conservative estimates from the World Health Organization. And for me, living in Austria, it was never a big issue. You know, I thought we were pretty safe. But if you think about those numbers, it means 1 out of every 12 people worldwide fall ill every year to contaminate food. And so they are using a blockchain-based solution to track and trace food. And another question, do you know about those crypto anchors? Because I'm sure you've heard about using the blockchain in the supply chain. That's nothing new for you, most likely. But what we are doing in the supply chain, or what most solutions do, they're tracking the packaging, right? And there are a couple of solutions out there that are not tracking packaging, but the goods themselves. And one of them is from IBM, crypto anchors. Do you know about those? You can use those anchors to tag the products themselves. In pharmacy, you can use them to track the pill and not the packaging. And I have another example for you here. That's an Austrian company. They're doing something that's called Isotope Labeling. So what the heck is that? They're using some kind of isotope analysis to really check if it's the same product that somebody ordered and that was being shipped. You can use it, for example, for honey. Honey is very easy to fake because you just put sugar in it. And they're making an isotope analysis. In the beginning, they're creating a database with the footprint of the product, and in the end, you can check when you receive the product if it was really honey, for example. So, yeah, I think that's my last example. That's another startup we're working together with in the city of blockchain. This is a solution for reducing traffic in cities. So again, sustainability, less traffic in the city. It's a combination of public and private transportation system. So finding the best transportation medium for you. Now, those are just a couple of examples. Final slide. Yeah. When I was doing this presentation for today, I came up with the idea, hey, I can edit a book about it. So are there any academics in the room? A couple of them. So if you like, my next plan is to edit a book about blockchain and sustainability. If you have some nice ideas, if you have some nice cases, or even if you're a startup and working on a sustainable solution, let me know and I can publish you in my next book. Thank you.
Does anyone have a quick question or two for Horst? Any questions? Yep. One.
In the commons environment, they're actually using a different coin, Faircoin. Is that related in any way to the Frycoin?
I've heard about Faircoin, but I don't have any insight. I think they're not related. But
that's my feeling too.
yeah,
okay.
but I don't know any
Now,
details.
Faircoin is a kind of it's a Bitcoin equivalent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, I know the name, but I'm only using Bitcoin for purchases, honestly. But when I heard about Frycoin, I was really intrigued, and I had not used it before. But then I downloaded the client, and I got in contact with Mark Friedenberg, and you can see it online. There's not much trading volume, but they have high hopes, and I'm just fascinated by the idea. It's something, you know, you studied decades ago, but you figure out it will never work in real world. But then the technology comes up, and somebody puts it in code, and now it can work. I'm not saying it's going to happen, it will work. I'm saying it could work.
No, actually, there's an economic application for it. If you use it in small communities, the money stays within the community.
Yeah, they have done it in local communities, like the one example from Austria I've told you, but then the National Bank comes along and says, from now on you're not going to do it anymore. Now you have hyperinflation.
A monopoly.
Yeah, monopoly.
Well, actually, I'm following the previous speaker. Frycon has been around since 2013, and I would call it a failed experiment. I mean, it hasn't got any traction since, so probably it won't have any traction now after 6 years. The only environment in which these systems can exist is when you force a community of people to use this. For example, when a local government would pay out people in this currency, and they're kind of forced to use it locally, or with the punishment of demerge. But so I was surprised to see Frycoin in this presentation, because Frycoin is an old idea that never took off in a free market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, two answers to that. The first one, yes, you need to force people. That's what I think. That's what happened in the 1930s. I mean, there's no better force than having hyperinflation all around you. Then you can try out something new. And the second thing is, I've learned about Frycoin a couple of years ago, and I just thought about it when I was putting together a presentation. Then I was checking out the market, and I saw there's not much trading volume. That's why I contacted the lead developers, and they told me that they are working on it, they want to have new features, and they have not given up on it. And I'm just presenting it as an idea. It's a very fascinating idea, because you put it in code. You don't need to trust any. It's similar to Bitcoin. But you put something in code, and then you cannot change it anymore. And you have to demerge. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but I just wanted to point out it's being under development. I guess we need to meet again in 5 years or so to see how it's worked out.
Thanks,
Okay.
Horst.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you.